Tonight on SIP episode 126, we tackle a very important topic, rain, and actually more specifically, its counterpart, drought. They can happen simultaneously, especially in Napa Valley. Tonight, our guest, Rebecca Sciandri of Sciandri Family Vineyards, and we discuss everything associated with rain. Where is California today in the drought, and how do you get a reservoir like this to help you with the property? SIP episode 126 begins now. I am thrilled with tonight's episode because we're going to talk about something that has impacted all of us nationally, globally, a little bit of climate change, but also the rain that we're going to talk about. It's Friday, so let's change gears because if it's Friday, SIP happens. And we can't do this program without you. I say it often, and I'll say it again. We drink serious wines. We just don't take ourselves too seriously. We strive for the 3 E's: entertaining, engaging, and educational. And tonight we have a topic, basically rain. And we're going to talk a little bit about this beautiful reservoir behind me. So let me tell you a little bit about the water climate problem that is allegedly happening. The rain has been coming off and on for years. We all know that it's cyclical. Some of the reservoirs are full. Some of the reservoirs are not full. Oh, by the way, let me start off by saying, hi, my name is Martin Cody. Told you I'd forget Rebecca. I am the co-founder of Cellar Angels. For those of you just joining, we are a direct-to-consumer wine company specializing exclusively and only with wines from Napa and Sonoma. 99% of the time, you can't get these wines at any retail or restaurant location because the wineries just don't make enough for any distributor to want to carry them nationally. You might find them in some local markets, in California, in and around Napa and Sonoma, but really when you're producing 1,000 or 500 cases, they're not going to get distributed. So you get them through Cellar Angels. You learn about them through Cellar Angels. And I know Doug is on, and Doug is making a cameo appearance because he has got a date with some LeBron James at a Timberwolves game. So Doug actually was the winner of this week's quiz question, which was: bans on irrigation lifted recently in several Bordeaux. Oh, hang on, that's the answer. This is terrible. The question was: vineyard irrigation is prohibited in Bordeaux. True or false? The answer was false, because bans have recently been lifted on several of the appellations in Bordeaux because of the water shortage. And interestingly enough, our next guest has something to say about that because something similar has happened in California. So with that, let's get to our guest this evening, who we are thrilled to go way, way back with. And in the blink of an eye, it's been 12 years since I think we first walked onto the property behind me, and it went all too fast. But ladies and gentlemen, I would love to introduce to you a friend of Cellar Angels, a producer of amazing Cabernet Sauvignon and some other wines, and also a couple other things, not even on this continent, that we're going to show you as well. Rebecca Sciandri of Sciandri Family Vineyards. I have an accent tonight.
So I just want to first acknowledge the conversation we had, and then you forgot your name.
I know. I'm well aware that it's literally.
It's a good thing my mic was off because I was laughing. Sorry.
I'm
with you.
I'm the opposite of Ron Burgundy. It is written on the teleprompter, and I still don't tell people who I am. So that is horrible. Rebecca, it is good to see you. Thank you so much for spending some of your Friday with us.
Of course. Cheers. Thank you to everyone for joining. Shout out to everybody who's on the Zoom for this wonderfully engaging topic about rain and weather and what it all means to Napa, Sciandri Family Vineyards, and farming in general.
Perfect. And I want to get in the rain, but I also want to acknowledge another super angel, Eric, in the house, because Eric too pinged us and said, hey, is there something wrong with your site? Yes, 800 fraudulent bots tried to place an order and then brought down the payment gateway. So that was fun.
What a nightmare.
What a nightmare is right. 5 days of a nightmare. Here's what I would like you to start off with, Rebecca.
Yes, sir.
Tell me about the family. Tell me when the wine in the family. I mean, you're Italian, so it goes back probably 7 generations. But fast forward, because it's only a 3-hour program this evening.
Right. The unprofessional production that happened for many generations, we won't get into. But
right.
But professionally, Sciandri Family Vineyards, my parents purchased 20 acres of land, which is in the photo behind you, in Coombsville back in the early 90s. Planted 2 vines in 99 when my father retired from the fire department. He became a full-time farmer.
So this wasn't planted when your family acquired it.
No, my dad planted that. My mom wanted him to do something with all that dirt was in front of the house. And he said, all right, I'll plant some grapes.
Okay. And that was in the mid 90s, and you planted your first vineyard in 99.
Yes, first vineyard planted Cabernet Sauvignon in 99. Growers sold to some amazing winemakers and production facilities in this valley, learned a lot. And in 2006, decided to launch Sciandri Family Vineyards. I will have to say the decision was made during the celebration of my father's 60th birthday party, perhaps consuming copious amounts of wine that was made by our vineyards. So all good decisions are made with wine.
I was just going to say, not the first decision made under the influence of great wine.
Yes.
All right. So that was 2006.
Yep.
And do you have the ability or liberty legally to say who were some of the folks you were previously selling your grapes to?
I do for a couple.
Okay.
So the very first buyer of our grapes was an amazing gentleman by the name of Rolando Herrera, who owns a brand called Mi Sueño. And our wine went into his Iliano blend. And in fact, fun fact, I know Cellar Angels loves a fun fact. My dad brought Rolando a Cab Syrah blend from Australia and said, you need to make something like this. And that's how Iliano was born.
Ah, okay. And I have 2 questions based upon what you said earlier with regards to your dad bought the land in the early 90s.
Wait, first, Chad Angelo, I agree with you. If Rolando makes it, you should buy it. It's delicious.
That's a good motto. I like that. And Hans and Caitlin, I agree with you. That is the best time to make decisions. It's like I tell people when they leave the restaurant at night, drive fast, take risks. It's the fun. So in the 90s, I'm curious, how did he find land available?
So here's another thing. In the 90s, Coombsville, not yet an appellation, not yet widely planted. We did have some established vineyards here. We had some pioneers. Of course, my pal and my neighbor, John Caldwell, was here. Simpkins Ranch was here. Bill Cadman with Tulake Wines was here. So there were folks here, but super tiny. No one really knew, mostly growers and being purchased. So there was lots of plots out here, land. Like even when my parents bought it and my husband and I first moved to Napa, they were like, why would you buy out there? Like, you moved way out there. Right. And so now fast forward, hard work from Coombsville vintners and growers and all the people who knew what a special gem it was. Now all the cool kids want to live in our neighborhood.
Exactly. And prices, I'm sure, are reflecting that demand.
Good thing I don't have to buy today.
Exactly. I might be the only one on this evening's broadcast that hasn't had a bottle of Caldwell. So how is that possible?
How is that possible? By the way,
yeah, and I know it's they sold and stuff, and I can't say that I blame them. But when we're out there this year, we're going to make certain we remedy that.
Yeah. So call me. I'll take you.
Done. And so in 2006, after a celebration, the decision is made. We're going to open up our own winery or get into the selling of our own wine business. Now,
yes.
You know better than anybody, growing wine or making wine is a heck of a lot easier than selling wine. So what was that first 2 or 3 years like, and how did you go about the sale of the wine?
So, and actually, before you can sell the wine, and you've grown the wine, and you've made the wine, and you have to cellar the wine, and you have to wait. And my dad was all, at what point can we sell it? Like, when do I actually get to make money doing this? So in 15 years ago this year, 2008 was our first release of the 2006 vintage of Sciandri Family Vineyards. We went to like all new wineries, I'm sure, with no marketing, no advertising, right. No is we went to friends and family and we begged.
Exactly. Have I got a deal for you?
Right, but a little bit. So we were very fortunate. My dad had some connections to some restaurants and some shops down in Southern California and Northern California that were willing, and then literally, much like the stories that you hear from the early days of Napa, my dad and I got in a car with cases of wine in it and drove up to Sacramento, drove down to the East Bay, drove in the South Bay, and just said, hey, would you be interested in trying a new wine and taking it on? So with that effort of just within California and just hitting small shops, hand selling, and then reaching out to people saying, how do we do this, whatever, that's how it began. So it was a slow and organic start. It takes a lot of hard work. It's not easy, especially if you don't have a marketing department or a sales staff.
Right.
It was a whole lot of passion. And then the good news is that our winemaker, Don Baker, has been with us since the very beginning and makes amazing wines and has taught us and helped us through this process, that we learned that if you have a lot of hard work and you actually have something worth drinking, people will come and follow. And then shout out to, by the way, to the club members who are in the room. I see a couple. Amy, hi, how are you? It is folks like that then started the tornadoes, right? Like they would go home, tell their friends, hey, I found this crazy family in Napa. And by the way, they make great wine. You should try it. And so that's how we have built our business from the day one.
No, that's amazing. And Karen A, I see you. Lisa, welcome. Lori, welcome. Marcia, welcome. I already mentioned Peter
Amy,
G was.
I took Amy to Caldwell.
Yes, you did. So who was the decider on, okay, we're going to get into the wine business. We're going to grow and sell X. What varieties do we want to focus on? And tell me a little bit about that decision-making process.
So the decision to what to grow and what to plant was mainly my father. And he did that along with the help, actually, John Caldwell, and then another man by the name of Francisco, who was planting vineyards in different areas. And my dad said, do you think grapes would grow here? And he said, I've been wanting the previous owners to plant grapes there for 15 years. Yes, I do. I think so. So
oh my goodness.
My dad had the benefit of people who were already here and in the industry to help him understand what clone to plant, what rootstock to use, how to position the rows for it to be high quality wines. And so we so fortunate to the connections that we had in the Valley prior to getting into this crazy business. So that decision, planting, growing grapes, was my father's. Fast forward, the other decisions, also expanding the vineyard to do the Bordeaux vineyard in the back. It's a whole different story. The Nello, it's a field blend. It's a throwback to old world field blend winemaking in Europe. And that also was my father's decision. And my passion grew alongside his as I watched this grow. So now all the crazy day-to-day operations and decisions are mine. So when you see mistakes that we made, it's really good to take credit for all the decisions that go well. I'm like, yep, that was me. But also when things go back, it was me.
And this is a perfect segue, because you don't make mistakes this month because it is International Women's Month. So there are no mistakes made. I actually think it should be International Women's Year, quite honestly. There's no way we would all be anywhere near where we are without women. We, first of all, wouldn't be here.
Right. You're welcome for that.
Thank you. But I do want to honor Rebecca for, just persevering and taking the bull by the horn, so to speak, which leads me to ask the question, what did you do before this?
Oh, I call it the time BC, actually, before children. I actually started my career in tech. I worked for a Cisco router training company, and I did their logistics planning and office development. So I traveled the country setting up training facilities for people who wanted to learn how to program Cisco routers.
Wow. I can't believe it was a tough jump to get into wine.
Yeah, I'm not a corporate girl, Martin. So when we got bought out and I got a manual that said, here's your new dress code, I just said, thanks, I gotta go.
Oh boy, boy, boy. All right. So last week we had the pleasure and honor of the company of two individuals, Ken and Elise Nerlove, and you two have worked on a project, Save the Family Farms. Bring us up to speed. We know that both of you and several others were instrumental in getting an ordinance change, which
Elise was absolutely a fiercity and a driving force. Like, I was part of that whole problem and progress for many years. There's been many iterations of that before Save the Family Farms became the organized thing that it is. And Elise showing up to the meeting and being so passionate about making it happen was a game changer. I thank her. I welcome her. Her energy is intoxicating. It's wonderful. Without her, there were a lot of us behind it and a lot of really good energy. Without her, I don't think it truly gets done the way that it got done. So big shout outs to her. And her dad, Ken, is amazing. He makes me miss my dad a lot. But
and I know we're like phase one of that is done.
Right.
Phase two. So where are we in phase two?
The ordinance passed. There is a path forward for small wineries. There are many of us, including Sciandri Family Vineyards, who are in the process of doing feasibility studies, talking to engineers and planners and saying, come to the property. Actually, see that spot behind you, that little building there probably won't be there if things go the way we want. We're going to move it and put our tasting room down on the other side of that lawn, just outside a shot, where we can then officially welcome guests to Sciandri Family Vineyards and host you and share wines with you, pond side and vineyard side. So that is a process. The guesstimate, because this is all new, even the county doesn't really know how this is all going to work out, because we're kind of all learning as we go. The guesstimate is that maybe about a year to 18 months in process, right? In permitting process. And so then I'm going to imagine 6 months ahead of that for me to get my plans together to submit to them to move forward. So probably 18 months to 2-year process.
Wow, good. That's exciting. It is what it is.
It's a path forward for micro wineries that has never existed before. It is the first of its kind in any county, in any region, a micro winery that actually addresses people of our size. So
let me ask you this before I recognize Rhonda and say hello and thank you for joining. Sean, hello. How many micro wineries do you
Brett,
think?
Sorry.
What's that?
I said hello to Brett. He's also on there. I just saw him.
Oh, good. Hi, Brett. How many micro wineries do you think there will be, say, in 10 years because of this ordinance in Napa?
So here's the good thing. One of the biggest problems is public opinion about what this means to Napa Valley, and people thinking that there are so many micro wineries and we're going to have neighborhoods with wine tasting rooms in them.
And tour buses and
tour buses. First, that's not how this works. Second, we're so small. We can never accommodate, nor do we want a tour bus. We're talking about small groups, 2-4 people at a time, maybe twice a day, maybe once a week. It depends on your time and availability. But the amount of people that qualify for this is kind of a moving target. But I say 5 years from now, there might be a dozen micro wineries that didn't have a permit before that can now. And I think that 10 years from that, we might have more, maybe double that. But I think then that's,
right. There's a finite amount that can actually qualify. So
it's a very finite amount, and making a living as a micro winery is not easy. It's not overly enticing to the folks who want to make more money and more wine. Like that's not this path. So this is not for the path of people who want to start at 500 and grow to 5,000. That's not this path. So this is for people like us who say, I don't want to be the next anybody else. We want to just be Sciandri Family Vineyards. We love where we are. We want to stay the 500 to 1,000 cases. We don't want to get bigger, and we want to be able to welcome guests to our home.
Correct. Let me make a note, no tour buses.
Yeah, no tour buses.
That's, I apologize to everyone.
But party buses, yes, no, just kidding.
Yeah, I apologize to everyone that already put their deposit in. We'll send those back. Peter has a question. Could you please define what the law allows and the purpose? I'll go with purpose, because the purpose is that these small wineries that previously were legally restricted from actually having people at their property serving and selling wine can now legally, when they file this ordinance and get this license, and there's a whole bunch of restrictions, you can't grow past a certain amount, you can't produce X amount. So the big boys were a little bit scary that this was going to be your path to go from 1,000 cases to 10,000. And that's not at all what this was intended to do. It was just intended to allow people to come legally to the small limited production family wineries, because it's expensive to open up a tasting room. It's expensive to, have a facility. Which we'll get to where you are now, but define what the law allows.
So the ordinance allows for wineries, 5,000 gallons and under, which if you want to do the math is not a lot of wine, to be able to host guests, daily trips. You can apply for, I think, it's like 20 daily trips, but that includes any employees. So round trips, people coming and going. You're never going to be able to reach that, by the way, if you're like me, because I do my own tastings and hosting. So and then you're not allowed any marketing events. So it's not meant to be just a separate event kind of space. You have to have your over 75% of your wine has to come from your own property. So it's not like you can buy a small property and source fruit. It have to be estate grown. It has to be owner operated. There's all kinds of caveats and rules that just allow folks like us a path. So right now we don't have a path, or before the ordinance passed, before the ordinance passed, tasting room visits were directly related to winery operations. So small folks like us do what's called alternating proprietorship. We have the license, an O2, not to get crazy into the world, but it's a wine production license, that then we lease space at a winery to make our wine, so that we don't have to, and we don't tear down trees, build facilities for 500 cases of wine. Napa County's ordinance was linked to wine production and wine tasting. So there wasn't a way for us to do it without having a facility on site. This now takes that portion and says, you still must make wine on site. That winemaking is still a criteria. So we do have to have a facility on site, which we are in the process of figuring out what that looks like for us. And you must make wine on site, but it can be a much smaller amount, and you can co-production so that then you can do tastings on site. It's just a way, like right now where I'm sitting, we'll segue through this, is a downtown tasting room in Napa. So happy to be a part of it. I am part of a cooperative that hosts 8 small producers like myself called Mia Carta, and it's downtown Napa on First. And it's wonderful, but it's costly. And so we work on tiny margins, and I lose a lot of that to be here, but just so I have a place when you come to town that I can meet you and pour my wine. So being able to do that up at the vineyard will help my business tremendously.
Yeah, it's a huge boon. And it's funny, Rebecca and I were talking, and those of you that have traveled to Napa in the last 10 years, you've seen the resurgence of downtown Napa, or certainly the modernization, the growth, the expansion. 15, 20 years ago, there might have been one tasting room in downtown Napa. Now there's going to be people that will go to Napa, stay in downtown Napa, spend 3 days hitting tasting rooms in downtown Napa, and then fly home and say, yeah, we went to wine country, and never leave downtown Napa.
And it's a great way to experience many wines in a short period of time. But
correct.
there also is nothing like actually getting out, visiting the vineyards, seeing the people who own and operate the land, and just seeing the heart of where this whole crazy place started.
Yes. Chris JP, I did not say hello to you. And tonight's topic is rain. So I'm going to go to our first poll question on rain. And then Rebecca and I are going to drill deep on the rain aspect and the drought aspect. So according to a service called Music Grotto, the #1 song with rain is, with the word rain, Fire and Rain, James Taylor, Singing in the Rain, Gene Kelly, Purple Rain, Prince, Box of Rain, Grateful Dead, No Rain by Blind Melon. Rebecca watched Singing in the Rain.
I want it to be that.
Did you not want it to be that?
Great musical.
Great musical. All right. The new folks don't recognize that when you subscribe to join, there's a way that we can ping your credit card. And there's a lot of gambling that goes on with the poll questions. So feel free to place a wager.
Explains our bot experience.
All right. So I'm going to give this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Almost a tie. So
A tie?
I said almost.
Oh, Purple Rain. I wouldn't have picked Purple Rain, but that should, like, my age should say I picked Purple.
The answer is actually Purple Rain. So
Yeah.
I tried to throw people off with the Gene Kelly.
I wanted it to be Gene Kelly.
You and me both. But since tonight's whatchamacallit topic is rain, let's talk a little bit about drought. Now, thankfully, in the last month or two, there has been some significant rain, but droughts go for years. And
Atmospheric rivers.
What's that?
Atmospheric rivers is what they're.
Yeah, we've heard a lot of terms, some river bombs or all sorts of
I've never
stuff.
heard so many terms for rain in my life.
Exactly. So according to the latest U.S. Geological Survey, and this was done within the last 10 days, what percent of California is in drought? I see any smartphones looking this up, and you will get some demerits. You will not be allowed at the tasting room, the one in the city or the one that is being built. And I'm going to throw something in the chat because I had a typo earlier. That's not surprising at all.
Yeah, the survey was done very recently.
Scotland, I'll ask the math questions. Someone tell me how many cases are in 8 barrels, please. All right, 5, 4, Chad to the rescue.
Yeah. Way to go, Chad.
3, 2, come on, there's still a few people out there. 1, 0. All right, now this is going to, now Rebecca knows the answer. So why don't everybody yell out what they voted for? All right, we don't have cameras on yet. That's not going to work.
Right. That's not
all right. The answer, it's interesting, by the way, I'm going to go with 11 out of the 19 people chose 27%. And I think that is because of the media, because everyone, we all hear, unless we're out there, that it's crazy, crazy drought. Everyone's, run for the hills. The answer is 9%. So the entire state of California is currently in 9% drought, which is amazing. Eric, it's 98% in Nebraska. Exactly. So that is interesting. And it was a little bit higher than that, not too long ago, this most recent year.
Last year, it was over 90.
Holy cow. So 1 year, which gets to, yes, for those of you.
Which gets to this whole reason we're here tonight.
So it's interesting, and Mission Control is going to turn on people's cameras if you feel so inclined and are safe for work. Please keep that in mind. It's sweeps week next time we come on. So
if you turn on your camera, you better have a full glass of Sciandri wine.
Yeah. And if I see people drinking white, we'll turn your camera
Right.
off from
Oh,
mission
there you
control.
go, Jeff and Jim.
So
Oh, with the Cellar Angels Cup. I love it.
ABM, always be marketing.
Hello, Auntie Galen. How are you?
So the drought, you said the state was a 90% drought a year ago.
Right. So just over a year ago, our reservoirs were depleted. Most of the state was in, over 90% of the state was in some form of drought. Now, not all severe drought. There are many levels of drought, but there was some form of drought in over 90% of our state. And we were looking at some pretty dire straits. However, Mother Nature is pretty awesome. And so this year, at the end of last year is when it started, but we are continuing to see and feel rain much farther into the spring than traditional. But when you say traditional, it's cyclical. So now in a very short period of time, we are down to 9%. The challenge is then, how do you handle that, right? Because so much at the same time can be very challenging. Not only for a state, but for small parcels, causes all of its own kind of issues with flooding and mudslides and things like that. So there's all kinds of challenges when you get so much so quick. But the good news is, I tell people all the time, look at Mother Nature is no fool. She will take care of herself. So whether or not that includes us, who's to see?
Yeah.
But she will
That's a good
manage.
point.
She will manage just fine with or without us.
Yeah, she's getting a little irritated with us, but
She's a little angry. She's a little hangry. I think she needs a glass of wine.
yeah. You know, it's interesting because I want to ask a question, but before I ask the question on how much
people, this is so exciting.
How much rain is a fair or average amount, I do want to share a graph. So Rebecca was kind enough to share from some very reliable sources, essentially rain and temperature for the last 30 years. So I find this fascinating. The only thing I don't know, Rebecca, is where in Napa these readings were taken, but
so the secret sauce is I have amazing neighbors who are technology forward in a huge way, both in wine production and in management of their vineyards. And they were so kind to share their collective data with me. And so this is Coombsville specific. Oh, okay. No, this one here, 1972 to 2022 is Napa Valley. That's a conglomerate of Napa Valley. The other one, the 2001 to 22, that's Coombsville specific.
Well, here, and it's kind of interesting that they started measuring solar intensity, and
yes,
and solar intensity doesn't start going off the charts until the last 4 years.
Well, that's when they started measuring it. So they just started measuring it. So
but I think it's also interesting.
That is not an indication of global warming. That is just a measurement that just started.
Great. That now I feel better.
Me too. I asked the question. I'm like, wait a minute, I have a question about these little 4 bars.
Well, it is also interesting too. You can look at the rainfall from certain vintage years along with the high and low temp. Yep. And you know, you look at 2012, which was a pretty darn good year in Napa, and you had low temps on average, you know, semi-low rainfall. And then you go to another year where you have high temps, and 96 and 98, by the way, was pretty much maligned in the trade magazines.
Agreed.
And I know, and 11 was interesting too, because 11 was maligned. But I could stare at this for a long time and just compare it with vintages and things that I love.
So Martin, when I got these, and not to step on your toes, but when I got these graphs, I did exactly what you're discussing. Is I went through and I like looked at them all, and I was like, by vintage, my favorites, where they were, how they grew up, what people's thoughts were about a vintage, and then what the reality was about a vintage. I'm amazed. I love data. So it's fun. Yep. It's fun and interesting to me.
So, and here's another one, which I think is also equally fun.
Yes.
I had no idea, by the way, year-round average temps were this low. I don't know why I thought it was warmer.
And that's Coombsville specific. This is the graph that's Coombsville specific. So we are in the southern eastern hills of Napa. We do,
Yep.
right? One of the things that we boast about is our cooler climate. We tend to be about 10 degrees cooler than the middle of the valley or the valley floor. It's what allows the Cabernets to have a longer hang time, have a longer grow season, and develop all those beautiful flavors on the vine. So this is also what makes me go to the hairdresser, is because I have to cover all the gray hair that comes before harvest as winter approaches and my fruit is still ripening.
Well, and
I
when you
looked
said
at this and I looked at this and then told my family that all of my hairdresser appointments are now deductible as job hazard.
well, and this is another one where the 07 vintage was well regarded in the press. The 05 vintage was a superstar vintage. Again, the 11, not so much. And it's interesting when you look at temperature and rainfall. I mean, 13 was a pretty much.
And by the way, the 13 is a phenomenal vintage.
Exactly. I was just going to say it's a blockbuster vintage and off the charts from flavor expression, density. It's amazing vintage. One of the coolest vintages on record with the least amount of rain.
Right.
And it was,
Crazy.
Martin, it was huge in big fruit, big tannins, and big acidity. It was
15.
Yes, 15 is also that way.
Low yields, big wines. And so when you're talking about grape growing, thank you, Chad, because this leads straight into the discussion about what does it mean for us, right? What do all these charts mean? Is that groundwater, grape, everyone knows, right? Stressed grapes make great wine. So groundwater builds all these wonderful rains. We need them and they're important. But what happens as the water starts to deplete and the vines start to stress, the expression of the grape becomes bigger, right? So some of the years with the greatest rain yield, and it's kind of interesting because the rain in Napa County doesn't typically start until after harvest. So when you see a year like 2012 with a high rain yield, that expression actually pushes into the 13 vintage, right? Because the rain is coming most of the time after harvest. And then groundwater is being replenished. So it's not that 2013, the year had less rain, but 2012 winter had a lot. So it pushed into that to hold the vines and the root system all happen. So there wasn't, the vines were stressed just enough to reach the water they needed to reach, and expressing themselves in a big way. When you have multiple years of big rain, then the vines, it makes it a little like, right, the expression maybe isn't as grand. Look at the year prior to that, the 2011, like you said, Martin, a little bit of a challenging growing season. It was wet during the season and it was cool. The weather was much cooler. So the grapes express themselves differently. It was a little bit higher acidity. It was a little bit less sugar, but the complexity of the wine was absolutely gorgeous. If you were able to make 2011 wine, especially in Coombsville, you made amazing wine. I love our 11. Everyone dismissed the vintage. Our 11 was amazing, is amazing. And so it's when you look at those graphs, you have to remember the timing of the year, right? So wine grapes grow at certain times of the year and rain comes at other times. Mm-hmm. It's like right now where the rain and the growing happen together, that then as a farmer you start to have an issue.
So Michael, who is well versed in all things wine related, brought up a great point with regards to reservoirs and USGS not taking into account kind of some of the groundwater recharge needed to replenish the water table. And what they're really just focused on is reservoirs right now. And so here's a look at California's major reservoirs. And I can blow this up a little bit because we've got very sophisticated software. So you can see Shasta, which I showed a couple of weeks ago, is at 87%, but some of these are over 100%. They're past where they should.
This you should know, this diagram is probably maybe 8 to 10 days old. I don't remember,
Yeah,
there's a date on there, the day I
March-
pulled it.
March
And
13th.
so, and we've had significant rain since then. So some of those numbers have increased. And Martin, as we discussed earlier, some of those numbers haven't increased, but for very good reason.
Yeah. You can tell that story. I think that's a funny story because there is one of these. How is Casitas at 52%?
Yeah.
And New
You look at
Melanus.
ones like Trinity and Casitas and you say, what, are they just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Is that what their problem is? And unfortunately, the answer is no. For those of you who don't live in California or understand how California reservoir system works, it's very old, it's very antiquated. The reservoir system was meant to not only be a holding tank for wine, but also to handle floods as well as drought. So according to our regulations in our state, the first thing that those reservoirs have to do is release water for fish and wildlife and all of those things. And some of those reservoirs are so old that they have some, let's just call it deferred maintenance. And so when all of this rain came, and they didn't used to plan the reservoirs based, the ability to project weather is much better now than it was when these systems were put in place. So some of these reservoirs don't have, like, they release more water because they're told to, then if rain doesn't come, they don't have any water. Some of them, ones you see that aren't quite where everyone else is because they have deferred maintenance. There are actually several reservoirs in our state that can't hold capacity right now because they aren't capable of it. Not that the rain isn't there, but they have to keep letting the water out because the reservoir itself needs work and maintenance. So that's just an infrastructure issue with our state that we need to work on. It's too bad that we weren't more proactive about it. But the good news is much to the point that was just brought up, is that, again, Mother Nature is taking care of herself. If we're not replenishing the groundwater and the resources, Mother Nature is going to take care of it for us. She is supplying enough water right now. At Sciandri Family Vineyards, our groundwater and our reservoirs are full. They're happy, they're healthy, and much of our area is feeling the same thing. I can only speak to where I am because I don't know the specific situations of everybody else, but we also had our governor made some adjustments to regulations.
By the way, I think he took a cue from Bordeaux. Bordeaux made some adjustments as well.
I believe he did, and he said that while typically we are not allowed to collect rainwater because the rainwater anyways belongs to the state, that he has relaxed those ordinances, allowing folks to collect their own rainwater, use for things to replenish their groundwater and all of that, which is all good news until it's not. So how long does that stay in effect until it becomes an issue? Remains to be seen. But my faith remains in Mother Nature. She'll manage it. She'll figure it out. If I remain a sustainable farmer and I take care of my land and I'm a responsible person with my pond and my vineyard, then I think that in the long run, we'll be in a good place.
Yeah, we refer to that in Cellar Angels lore as kindness. It's a often forgotten trait and virtuous. And so you hit it on the head. It's a good idea to catch the water and contain the water for yourself until it's not, because someone's going to go get 50 dump trucks, take it all, and then try to start selling it and get a little greedy. I do want to show where Rebecca's wine is available. And I asked earlier about if everyone could go order a sip kit for themselves and 4 other people in their neighborhood. That would be awesome. So you go to the Cellar Angels website, and from here you will see and learn all about why we do what we do. And quite honestly, we started the company in 2010 specifically to help folks like Rebecca, to help folks like Chad that are limited production wineries that there's no economically feasible way for them to travel to 30 markets a year, tend the vineyards and that sort of stuff. So an elegant platform to help get the word out on how great these wines are, and to access these wines needed to be made. So we made one. So now you can go to wine and you will be able to see that there is a sip kit available. And the sip kit is for these Friday events. And it is something that we did to start at the start of the pandemic, because quite honestly, human beings are a communal nature. We need socializing. And since we couldn't socialize, we came together virtually. And this is SIP episode 126, everyone. You all have invited us. I'm going to get choked up. Have invited
Jeff,
us into,
good idea.
have invited us into your home 126 weeks. And it's incredible. We don't deserve it, but we're going to take it. So thank you for that. Please grab a sip kit. There's a couple special bottles in here I'll talk about in a second. Hill, Bonita, Hursley, and of course some bubbles from Cellar Estate. And you can read about them all here. I'm specifically focused on this Cabernet right now. I will click into it. There's more pretty pictures. There's only 17 in stock. And from what I've read in the comment line, everyone is enjoying this. And I agree with Scotland. It is incredibly balanced, Rebecca, and we'll get into this in the aromas, flavors, and pairings for a 15.1% alcohol wine. You don't taste any alcohol. I mean, it is amazing. You've got the text sheet, tasting notes. I do want to see how much you made. 8 barrels. There we go. That's where the question came from. So yeah, you're looking at 200 cases. Not a lot of wine, but definitely an amazing wine. I'm thrilled for that. And now I know Jeff is going to absolutely crucify me if I don't show you where you're located.
Jeff, thank you.
All right, so let's just go to our friendly planet that Mother Nature is saving from ourselves. And I do want to talk a little bit about the next 3 weeks. Cellar Angels is off because we're coming back just in time for sweeps weeks. And we've got a couple special events called, but we're actually going to be in Europe doing some scouting and some socializing and seeing, but we aren't the only ones that are going to be in Europe. So Rebecca's taken a contingency to what I've nicknamed Sciandri East. And I don't know if you've caught it, but she's Irish. No, she's not. She's Italian. So this little slice of heaven is where, Rebecca? What's that?
It's my family Paese. It's their little town.
That's Rebecca's family's little town. And it is in the mountains. How far north of Florence?
Oh, a couple hours by train.
That doesn't look like a bad place to take a vacation with Rebecca.
Anybody who wants to take a Rebecca there at any time, she's willing to go.
Not a bad view. And is the pool a community pool for the town, or is it just for your guests?
It's just for the guests. And the first time I brought my children there was in 2014. And it was the first time I saw the pool. And I giggled because when I went there as a little girl, no piscina, there was no pool, there was no indoor plumbing.
That is incredible.
This is where my great grandmother was born and grew up. And my cousins turned their homes and their village into an agriturismo with the help of the Italian government. So we can welcome guests and show them the beauty of the Tuscany region we come from, delve into our agriculture, which is chestnuts there. So they make chestnut flour, and my cousin Luca is a chef and he makes amazing things out of chestnuts and chestnut flour. And I am taking 18 amazing guests for a week to come and hang out with me and in the mountains to do sapori festivals, which are flavor festivals of regional, so little towns like Fivizzano, places where your travel agent will never tell you about because they don't really have hotels. So
no, I'd be hard pressed to leave the pool, but if your cousin Luke is a chef, that would get me out of the pool and into
it's just right up the street. Don't worry, it's just a small walk.
Oh my goodness.
Right
That's
there. That's where you eat.
That view's terrible. My goodness.
It's right. It's terrible.
All right. For those of you that had a couple.
My family came to visit for my dad's birthday, the year we decided to make wine, they looked over our vineyard over Coombsville and the beautiful views we have of the Western Hills. And we all agreed it very much reminded us of the mountains here.
It's amazing. I mean, that is just comical how beautiful that is. So for those of you that have had a couple glasses, shut your eyes because this gets pretty daunting. Now we're going to go back to Rebecca's home. So earlier, Rebecca had commented that they get their rain early in the spring, January, February, and also after harvest. Does anybody want to throw in chat why that is? How come I can't see chat?
My chat moved too. Oh,
Chat does not suck. No, it does not. Well, the reason why the rain comes at those specific times, and someone probably answered it, we're talking about it a lot with these two counties. That's a definite hallmark of an attribute of a Mediterranean climate. Certain times of year for rain. And Rebecca, I know you get rain January, February, and March. And actually, by the way, this year, a lot of snow too. What is from bud break on, which is happening now in a lot of the areas? How much
hopefully
rain?
not yet.
Oh, I've seen it. So it is
No,
happening.
it is. We are not yet in bud break. Well, actually, that's not true. We have a couple of varietals that are just starting to shoot. And 2 nights ago, I wasn't really sleeping, but we survived so far, I think.
So after bud break to harvest, how much rain do you want on a monthly basis?
So minimal. And we had this discussion when we talked about this. It's a hard thing to give an actual number because it's so varied on varietal. If I am growing Pinot Noir, I want little to none because the skins are really thin. And as we approach harvest and they ripen and they grow, the rain can split and crack those skins very easily. So they're very susceptible to rain. I am very fortunate to grow something called Cabernet Sauvignon, which is a very hardy varietal. So for us, marginal amounts of rain, midsummer, little dustings of water aren't going to hurt. They're going to help the ground ready. We don't really irrigate that much. We tend to have to irrigate on typical years, late in the season, July, August, if we're going to hit plus 95 for multiple days, we will proactively water the week prior to that, which is where I talk about California and this United States and the world being so much better at weather prediction, helping in farming. We can now project a little farther out so I can see a pattern coming. I can proactively put water on the ground to help the vines just survive that moment, as opposed to guessing and just saying, I have to water for 3 weeks because in case the heat comes, and then you have too much water. So we're able to spot check water and be very minimal with it.
And where Rebecca is sitting is new. So this I'm very excited about because it is in downtown Napa.
I hope you will all come visit us.
And you can see the Napa River and that whole restoration project that has been going on for 15,
By the way,
20 years.
I don't often give kudos to our government for their spending of money and their projects. The Napa River Flood Project was by far efficient, cost-effective, and the best thing they ever did for this community. We used to suffer terrible flooding this year. I couldn't even imagine what would have happened this year, given the amount of rain. And our flood project has been so successful since its inception. It was done by the Army Corps of Engineers. It's a brilliant, genius project.
It is pretty cool, and I encourage people to do some research on it because they've got the ability to open up gates and move things around.
And right through there, and on the other side of that oxbow, right there through the field.
Yep, it's pretty darn cool how they've diverted that from when it starts to flood. But let's go down street level and see where we are.
To where we drink, where the flooding happens. You can just watch it.
So this is the intersection of Coombs and First. And this is Rebecca's Tasting Room and Co-op. Now, for you folks, and many of you have been here, to give you a little orientation, here's the Archer Hotel. Right down there is the Andes. Across the street is the Norman Rose, which I eat at almost all the time when I'm in the city.
Was there the other night. Great lamb burger.
That's right. This is where Rebecca's tasting room is. So it is very easy to walk across the street from one of those lodging highlights and hotspots and come on in and taste not only Rebecca's wine, but 7 other limited production, small family run wineries.
Thank you, Chad.
And now, interestingly enough, let's see where the property is.
So just
There
a
you
hop, skip, and a jump from downtown.
I've got you
This
covered,
is
girl.
This is the secret of Coombsville. See how close I am, but it feels forever away.
Here's what also is interesting is, you know, you've got some mountains around. It's pretty insane that you're right on this bench land. And Coombsville is incredible. And so here's the Sciandri property. And you can see how beautiful and majestic this is. And how, wow. I don't know what they were paying.
You make us look good.
I don't know what they were paying firemen in the 90s, but that was a steal. That is beautiful. So the pond that we're talking about here, that you have the ability to release water from that, correct?
Yes, so we have the ability at the western end or the bottom end there of that dam is some gate, a floodgate, and we have boards in there, and so we're able to release water kindly down to below us and not flood out our neighbors. We can release it gently and nicely down below. It is that reservoir, there's a whole nother story. Come visit me. I'll talk to you all about my mother's trips to Sacramento with my 8-year-old son to the water board to discuss that levee. It was built.
By the way, that water board phrase is different than the water board we all know. It's a different waterboarding.
Yes.
Uh,
But it was built to prevent flooding down at the Napa State Hospital a long time ago, and early mid 1900s. And so that is a spring-fed pond. It is enhanced and a bit larger because of the levee, but not tremendously. At its deepest, we are 45 feet deep. It's like cone shape.
45 feet deep. Holy
Yes.
cow.
We have a very blessed amount of water. We take runoff out of the mountain. So the snow that we got, we took some water. Our reservoir is happy and full right now. It is also, it was stocked artificially with fish. So we get the fun part of having a pond as well. So we can swim because it's fresh water. We can fish. We can have fun and entertainment, but we also can irrigate our vineyards responsibly with it. So it is absolutely the heart of our production and our vineyards.
And Hans, also going dark, has asked the question, if the neighbors upset you, can you literally pull out all the boards and just flood them out down the... Oh, so, okay. So I understand. I blink twice if you're okay. I understand the silent answer.
Jeff and Jane, I share the pond with nobody. It is entirely on our property.
Wow. That's incredible. What a purchase back in the 90s. Unbelievable.
Yeah. My dad was an avid outdoors guy, and he loved to bird hunt. And so recognizing the beauty and the reality of what that meant for that piece of property, he loved it. He built bird boxes on our property. So we have owl boxes, we have wood duck boxes, we have geese that migrate there every year, we have all kinds of waterfowl and animals that we share. Right, Jeff, that's who we share the pond with. We share the pond with Mother Nature. The other side of the hill there's wild boar, there's turkey, there's deer, there's mountain lions, and we share that with them as part of the ecosystem that all creates wonderful things. You can fly fish, but I don't know. Can you catch a bass fly fishing? I've never been fly fishing. If you wanted to fly fish, you could. My dad built my mom beach entry, so we have the only beachfront property in all of Napa County. So you can walk into the water on beach sand and not mud. So that's kind of fun.
No, that's amazing. That's incredible. And yes, Jim, you can go fly fishing. Now, the moment you've all been waiting.
It depends on how much wine you buy.
That's a good point. That's a good point. The moment we've all been waiting for, we will have the person we'll have the person who's making all the decisions for the winery give us the aromas, flavors, and pairings of the 2018 Cabernet.
Oh, what?
That's right. You got to put you on the spot.
Wait.
By the way, here's my professional tasting note. I freaking love this one.
This is, yep.
I'm here all week, Wine Spectator, if you need anything.
Right. Like, you don't even want to see my tasting notes. They have little smiley faces and flower, like floral. There's a flower, like smiley face, little cherry picture. I do doodles for my wine tasting, and then I ask the winemaker to transcribe them into real notes.
Yeah, I have that same cryptic formula as you. It's like PFG, VFG. It's like pretty freaking good, very freaking yeah.
So there's lots of currant in this wine. There's lots of deep cherry, not really ripe red cherry, but more of a deep cherry note to it. There is a little bit of a menthol. There is a little bit of greenness to it, which is very indicative of Coombsville. It's an enhancement, not a flaw, by the way, to have a little bit of that in your wine.
All right, I like that. I'll go with all those.
There's
Anybody
there's a little bit of bitter cocoa nib, like a little bit of bitter chocolate.
Ooh, you had me at cocoa nib.
And I happen to have had a tasting just prior to this lovely engagement, a group of 6 ladies, and came down and I tasted, because I was curious after looking at all the weather data and then looking at past vintages, and in my brain tasting the 18. So I went back to another vintage that reminded me of this, and I tasted the 08 next to the 18. And wow. That's where this is going, and I'm happy about it. It makes my heart happy. So if you're a fan of us and you have our 08 in your cellar, open it, drink it. It's delicious.
Interesting. I don't know if I could do that. I mean, if you planted in 6 and your first release was the 08, or your
no, the first release was 2006, but we released it in 08.
In 2008. Okay.
But the 2008 vintage, it was what I call one of the sleeper. 06 as well, but 08 was a vintage when we released it, just wasn't quite ready. Like, it just wasn't ready to be released. In fact, we almost didn't release it on time because it just wasn't presenting itself as drinkable as we would like. And 18 months later, it became like this amazing little creature that then started to develop. The 2018, now we're just releasing our 2019s this spring. Our wine club's getting them. I am packing boxes on Monday, so be prepared. But so the 2018 now is just starting to come into its own. It's just starting to show some of those really pretty characters that we're known for in our cabs. And so that's why, for me, it's kind of a late bloomer. It kind of reminded me of the 08 vintage.
Awesome. Now, go to can't miss. I would be remiss if I didn't mention, here's the foods you have to have with this.
You have to have rack of lamb with this wine.
Okay. I'm a big fan of that.
Yep. That's with this vintage. I'm all day thinking rack of lamb with rosemary, a little au jus, maybe a little risotto, a little bit of porcini mushroom.
Risotto, do you buy that at the store? Or do you make that? Do you buy the risotto at the store, or do you actually make it?
Are you truly asking me that question?
I am not, because I value my life. That's
we make our own risotto at home. It's not hard. It's time. It takes love and care. But
I don't. That's why I don't have the Popeye forearms. I don't make risotto. Okay, I am afraid.
Risotto and polenta.
Yes, risotto and polenta. All right. Anything you want to add on this wine or to the audience? Because I know we've gone over. I apologize, everyone.
I'm so sorry. I talked too much. People, I apologize.
No.
No, I'm super happy with how it's expressing itself. I think that now is a great time to buy it because it really is showing very nicely. It's a kind of wine you can order today. As soon as it arrives at your house, you can open it for dinner or take it to share with friends. Yes, a Bordeaux rice all day long and nothing else, MJ. You can't make risotto with anything else.
That could have been my problem.
You can't use jasmine rice, Martin.
White rice, not good either. Just FYI.
No.
Brown rice, not a good substitute. Don't let the Irish guy cook Italian food.
Do say the potatoes. That works.
Stay with potatoes. I have got you covered, young lady, in the potatoes.
Although, wait, I'm not gonna lie. I have for many years been making, I host St. Patrick's Day for my husband's family, Irish family, and I make a traditional corned beef, cabbage, and potatoes dinner, except for I don't care for that traditionally, so I put an Italian spin on it. I make a beautiful mustard glaze for the corned beef. I roast the potatoes, and then I think they're like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" I'm all like, "Yeah, it's Irish with Italian twist."
Yeah, and here's a Guinness to have with the spaghetti.
Yeah, and there you go. We also have soda bread contests that have things like chocolate chips in them, so like we're not traditional.
All right.
Anyway, if you haven't had the 18, or if you are drinking it and you think that it's something you're liking right now, it is just starting to show itself. It is just starting to give you all the greatness that it can. So I would add some while it's still here to your cellar, because as he said, we make very limited amounts. I don't have a lot left. I am happy to have offered it to Cellar Angels while it lasts.
And
But
we are
because
honored to have it.
Because of its limited quantity, I also did an extra special thing that Martian will tell you about now.
Yes, she's reading my mind. So everyone, I mentioned a couple super angels at the onset of tonight's program. Another super angel would be Rebecca, because I put in the chat line, misspelled the first time. The second time it was spelled correctly, the word angel share. So now that is a coupon code that Rebecca has thankfully, gracefully, kindly offered, because that is who she is. You will go, or you can go between now and the next 30 days, and you put in angel share to the Sciandri Family website, and she is giving you 10% off any of the Cabernet, any of the Nello, which is the field blend that you referenced earlier, and all of the large format bottles. So angel share, yes, thank you.
Yes,
Mission Control. She's right in the room with me and actually had to stand me up again. Hans, who's your attorney? Why are you separated again? I missed part of that. Yeah. Exactly. All right. I kid. I just. So angel share into the Sciandri website gets you 10% off. And I think the large formats would be a nice welcome addition to a lot of homes, because there's nothing like a Magnum.
So just if I can really quick
Please.
about our large formats, what you should know about our large formats is because we're a tiny production, they are even smaller. So we only make 10 cases, which is 30 bottles of the Cab and the Nello. So that is 100% while supplies last. Some of them may not yet be available by the time you get there, but I updated today the inventory that I had in warehouse. So while they're there and you can order them, this is the only, I have never offered a discount on those large formats before.
Which means get moving, people, because that is not going to stick around long. And that is incredibly kind, Rebecca. Thank you. I want to talk about an upcoming event, because as you know, we're going to be gone for 3 weeks. That's not what I wanted to share, so bear with me. That's, by the way, have you guys seen Rebecca's house? It's right down there. Let me figure out where I am. Card the little one in red right there, please, Eric. I don't. Hey.
Thank you, Scotland.
I love the little chillins. All right. So coming up, Rebecca, you've been amazing. As Mission Control has indicated, you can find prior SIP episodes in the chat. That link there takes you there. We are going to be visiting wine country in France for 3 weeks. Not all 3 weeks, but we aren't going to be back on the air for 3 more weeks. But come April 28th, this one is going to be interesting because we have long been fans of Ryan Hill and Hill Family Estate. Now, for those of you that have ever had the privilege of dining at the French Laundry, the Hill Family Gardens and the Hill Family has basically been producing Thomas Keller's produce for a long, long time. They also make some fantastic wine. And to what Rebecca was talking about earlier, they have a private label wine program. So they are private labeling this wine right here called Bonita Bonita. And for those of you that happen to follow WWE or WWF female wrestling, the Bella twins, which are now the Garcia twins, Nikki and Brie, are the makers of this wine. They are wrestling like gold medal winners, championship belt winners, but they are retired. I think they retired in 2014, but they were so smitten with Napa, so smitten with Yountville, and met Ryan, and they said, we have to make a wine. And Ryan, you'll hear the story from Ryan, but he was like, yeah, a celebrity wine. This isn't going to go well. No, they're pretty serious about it because they moved to Yountville. They also, one of them married, what's his name? John Cena. John Cena. So,
Yeah, that's his name.
What's that?
I said that's his name.
That's his name. It's going to be an interesting program, to say the least. It's going to be a 3-shot because it's going to be Ryan, the twins, me. It's going to be crazy. That Sauv Blanc we've tasted it. It's off the charts. I'm a huge fan of Hill Family's wine and everything that Ryan does. Again, another small producer doing great things. Not as great as all of you. So not as great as Rebecca, not as great of all of you and all the angels.
Wait, I love Ryan and his family. They're making good stuff. So if he decided to work with the Bella twins, I promise you it's nothing short of spectacular.
Agreed. And by the way, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank you all again for last Friday's birthday celebration. Arguably one of the best birthdays I've ever had. So you guys off the charts, couldn't have imagined it. Thank you for being deceitful, dishonest, lying to me, and making certain that I didn't know anything about it in advance. That's what I love you for. We don't deserve you. We're thrilled to have you. And Rebecca, thank you again for going over and spending so much time with us. Everyone be safe over these next 3 weeks. Be good to one another. The world needs a lot of virtuous people, and it starts right here. And oh, by the way, there's one. Cheers all.